Welcome to the Results Media Podcast. Grayson here and Rex over there. We are diving into another book review, and today we are talking about Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Last, which is a super awesome book.
Very awesome book, as we've discussed.
Yeah.
I really believe it's the foundation of our company.
Yeah, and so I'm really excited to talk about some of the concepts in this. The title can be a little funny at first if you don't really know what he's talking about. Leaders eat last. But basically, I feel like the main concept of this whole book is if you want to be a great leader, you want to be an exceptional boss, then you have to eat last. You have to be a great servant. You have to put your team, your employees above yourself.
Absolutely. Some of the examples that he used too that I really like, and he uses a lot about military because it's life or death. And
right.
So to get it down correct is very vital in the military. And so he tends to really lean on that. And is what he was saying is go to any mess hall. You won't see the leaders in the military, especially the Marines.
Right.
You're not going to see the leaders eating before their team does. Their team will always eat first.
Sure.
And it's just a way to show that respect. And as we get deeper into this, we'll make that even more clear of what he's really specifically talking about.
Right.
How accountable that he really suggests that a leader should be.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into some real depths of that.
Awesome.
Because he definitely, and I agree, and it's really helped me, I think, better myself and have some clarity. This is probably one of, and I've read thousands of books, but this has got to be one of the books that's actually impacted me more than me.
Yeah. So he starts off with the Johnny Bravo story.
The Johnny Bravo story, one of my favorite stories. So he really starts off with, and I identified with it right away because I come from the yacht industry, and so I've got some experience being out on the oceans in fog where you can't see. And so when he started telling the story, I really identified with it. And he starts with, because just the stress and the stress levels of not being able to really see. And so he starts with the story that you've got two pilots up there. You got a wingman and a Johnny Bravo. And they're flying up there covering some ground troops.
Yeah.
And so they're up there flying and doing their loops. And the one set, so the setup for it, this is I really need to say that they're using old Russian GPS maps. So that's where I was, I could identify with them, is that not just are they in bad weather elements, but they're running on very antiquated technology even for the time. So they're up there doing their loops and they get a message, that soldiers are under fire.
Yeah.
And so Johnny Bravo, without being ordered to, I want to go down and check it out. He knows that that's not good and wants to really see what it is. So he dives down into the fog, right into the clouds, and goes down, sees trace fire, sees that they're under fire. So he goes ahead and just starts lining out fire. And because he's on old GPS and old technology, he's having to count 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4 1,000, 5 1,000.
Yeah.
Because he knew it was about 5 seconds that before he had to pull up, before he hit a cliff.
Right.
So he'd drop off and, come up, and he'd go back up and fly around and come back down 1 1,000, 2 1,000. And he kept on doing that. Until he was out of ammunition. He goes back up to his wingman, tells his wingman that this is no orders to do this yet. He's just wanting to make sure he's taking care of his men.
Yeah.
Flies back up, catches the wingman. So the wingman is like, well, okay, but we're talking, I don't know what's going on. It's Russian, old maps. We don't know what's going on. And he says, don't worry, follow me. And he takes him down. And so he goes down and he says, just stay on my wing and you lay the fire. And so he takes the wingman and his pilot and he flies down there with the wingman right on his wing. And he counts 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4 1,000, 5 1,000 and pulls back up. And they go back around and they keep on coming down and laying fire.
Yep.
And the moral of the story is that there was 22 ground troops down there, and there was 22 ground troops that went home alive.
Right.
And Johnny Bravo didn't have to do that. He wasn't ordered to do that. There wasn't something over the radio, hey, get down there. he did that because it was his people down there.
Right. He even said that, if he had asked before he did it, they probably would have told him no.
Right.
But he knew that he had to go down there because his team was down there and he wanted to be their cover. Right.
Absolutely. And as we get through this book, you're really going to see where he really lays it out, that he wants the leaders to almost sacrifice their life for their team.
Right.
And we're going to get to the circle of safety and all these great things that really back it up. But I just think that it's just amazing how, because we all think, we want to be a manager, we want to be the boss and all these things. And we think that it makes our life maybe easier. And the funny thing is that that's exact opposite.
Right.
You have to do more. You have to serve.
Yep.
And that's where I think most people miss what leadership is about, is that it's serving. It's not what people think it is.
Yeah, he was saying that leaders need to be the first to go into danger.
Absolutely.
They got to be willing to put themselves out there before their team.
Absolutely. The next one I have in my notes, and you might have some in between, but
sure.
I wanted to talk about Chapman.
Okay.
And this story really caught my attention. And Simon Sinek just really takes, I think, complex issues and just paints such an easy visual picture that makes it easy to understand. So he talks about this Chapman. He's a CEO of a major company, but he's in I think a friend's party or something, some sort of social engagement outside of work. Mm-hmm. But what he notices is all the enjoyment and all the laughter and the people really connecting. And he sits back and he's watching this and he goes, why don't we do this at work?
Yeah.
Why don't we have this at work? And so he made some drastic changes from that event. It kind of changed his life. And so what he wanted to do is make people the assets. And so what Chapman was really doing is he was buying rundown businesses. Mm-hmm. So he's almost like a corporate bad guy.
Yeah.
And he's buys these rundown businesses and turns them around.
Typically by laying a bunch of people off and getting them back in the black,
back in the black, right? Yeah. Exactly. He was, just the standard corporate. Yeah. Let's come chop. Let's make the numbers work.
Right.
Whatever the numbers say, let's make that work.
Yeah.
And which is not that's the money asset, not the people asset. Right.
Right.
And so, what it really came down to is that willing to listen. Yeah. So what he did is he says, okay, I don't know. He didn't have the answers when he was at the party, right?
Right.
So he's like, okay, how am I going to get the answers? This is where it gets great.
Yeah.
So what does he do? He goes and talks to all of his employees and listens to them.
Exactly.
What a concept.
Yeah, seriously.
But what he found was a lot of things. So some of the stories that he talks about is, and this one really connects with me. Because I remember I grew up in a factory town. Yeah. And so my dad worked for a paper mill. Mm-hmm. And they worked 7 days a week, 24 hours. I mean, the mill was open 7 days a week, 24 hours. Right. And one of the things is that you can't have people going and getting parts and stuff like this. This is a massive operation. $100,000 maybe to shut it down for an hour or two. So they have their own parts warehouse, and they had it fenced and locked and all these things. Mm-hmm. And so I start reading this story. It was pretty incredible because one of the first things that he does is he finds out that people aren't really excited about having to go into this locked fence. Right. Is what it resonated into the employees' eyes as management don't trust us. Right. Because why would we trust them?
Yeah, the factory workers had to go and talk to somebody else, and they would have to go in and get the part. And they had to clock out just to use it, or they couldn't go to the bathroom. They had to wait till a bell rang and they could take a break. But the people that were in the office could just get up and go do whatever they needed to do.
So some of the things that, exactly, that's what he was hearing. So when they were saying is one of the stories I remember is he was talking about you've got all these office workers. And they're not made that much more money, if any more money. It's the same thing as we've talked about. Right. They're factory workers. But the perception is the guy on the line had to clock out, go to a pay phone because they didn't allow them to have cell phones. So they'd have to go to the payphone and call. Whereas they'd look upstairs and the people
just using the office line.
Just using the office line. And so, Chapman's like, well, that's the easiest solution in the world.
Right.
Come on.
Yep. Take the locks off, get some phones down there, and you don't have to wait for the bell to go to the bathroom or call your family or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Start treating the people as employees.
Yeah. The leaders of an organization must listen to the people that work there.
This is really emotional story, and it goes bigger than a company. So the paint department has this employee, or I think the supervisor, or just a good employee in the paint department.
Yeah.
And his wife has a tragic leg issue, and she's got to get it amputated.
Right.
We're not talking something small.
Right.
She's obviously needs help, and he can't afford to take the time off to go be there for her.
Right.
So other employees, as Chapman is starting to build this safety net, employees came forward and said, we want to give him our vacation time. Now, this is the funny thing, is that it was against the company rules.
Right.
And so Chapman it's against company rules?
Yeah.
Man, these are easy things to fix.
Exactly.
And so, the company grew like crazy.
Right.
And it was because the people were committed to him because he listened to them.
Right. Yep, and he changed the environment, which changed how everybody interacted with each other and changed the whole company culture.
He came up with the term too, truly human management.
It's good.
And so the employees, they felt safe, comfortable, which equals a relaxed and trusting employee.
Right. One of the things he said that I thought was really awesome was to earn trust, you have to extend trust. So he wanted his employees to be loyal to him and the company, but they were feeling like they were criminals almost because they had to go through all these process and procedures.
Cage.
Right.
Literally a lock and cage.
So he changed that, and it changed the whole dynamic of the relationship, which changed the company.
Yeah. Incredible.
Yeah.
So one of the ways that Simon was saying that this is so important is that, especially through the factory era, we as parents raise our kids and then we send them off to these factories to truly train them to be an adult.
Right.
And so when you start to put that into perspective as a culture, as a country, it becomes a lot more important of how we treat companies. And I've always said this, and something that, my family gets mad at me for this. I believe we have a lot more power as U.S. citizens in the way we spend our money than our vote.
Sure. Yeah.
And I really believe that we need to hold companies accountable. Mm-hmm. And we can do that very easily.
Right.
Just manage how we spend our money and who we spend it with.
Yep.
And if they're not doing the right thing, don't spend it.
Yep.
Don't work with them.
Yeah.
One of the lines... And I've heard this, and so it's a Simon Sinek line, quote, whatever you want to call it. I hear him say it a lot. Capitalism works better together, and commitment to our cause, and if we treat them as family, you actually create an environment that was designed for humans, the way that we were designed.
Right.
I just thought that was
that's good. That's a good point.
Amazing.
Yep. Just as we're talking about work and the environment and everything like that, he has a pretty crazy statistic that 80% of people are dissatisfied at work. That's crazy.
That is absolutely crazy.
Dissatisfied, unsatisfied with their job.
Now you're talking Chapman, right? Isn't that one of the statistics that he got right away as soon as he started listening to him? Or
this is just from Simon, in general. This is from Simon. Yeah, 80% of people are dissatisfied at work.
Scarier, yeah.
Only 20% of Americans love their jobs. That's crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah, and one of the points he was making was that when you're struggling at work, you're going to bring that home. If you're so dissatisfied at your job, you're coming home dissatisfied, and that's coming to your family, your spouse, your kids, everything. So if you're unhappy at work, where you spend the majority of your time, 8+ hours a day, chances are you're unhappy at home too because of that.
Absolutely. He even says, as a parent that works all evening and works around the clock and all that, but loves their job.
Yeah.
is actually giving a much better example in parenting than the parent that goes to work and doesn't like his job, comes home. Guess what the child is learning through his action?
Right.
Is that life isn't that much fun.
Right.
Because we spend most of the quality hours of our life at work.
Yep. Doing something you hate.
Doing something that you hate. You know? So, yeah, I loved that.
Yeah. And the question that he posed, this might have been Chapman, but he said, can we create a world where people love going to work? I think actually that's a Simon Sinek quote he uses all the time. It's just like, can we create that world? And, you know, he really believes we can, and I do too. Absolutely. If leaders eat last.
Well, and that's what we have to do. And I do really believe that we have a culture coming up that accountability is part of it.
Right.
And towards companies. And that's how we really got to, you know, we want to change culture. We got to have better companies.
Yep. Yeah.
One of the... and this one really surprised me. White Wall Studies came out with they did a huge study. And what they found is that the higher you go up in the chain, the less stress you have.
The chain of what?
The corporate ladder.
Okay.
So the higher you go up in the company, and you get more responsibility, you get more accountability, you have to be a leader,
yes.
You get all this, you have to work more, you have to try harder, you have to care more, but you have less stress.
Right.
It's because more often than not, if you're going through the ranks, you're a linchpin, you love what you do.
Yeah.
You're doing it for the right reasons.
Right.
And so it was amazing when I read the story, but it's funny how they found that the higher you go up in the ranks, the less stress you have in your life.
Yeah. He also talked about how when you don't feel trusted as an employee and you don't actually have freedom to do your job and you have to do it within a box, basically, that leads to the stress. So when you have a lack of control within a company to where you might have great ideas and you might have solutions, but the person above you shuts it down or won't let you do what you want or give you the freedom to make things better, that's what creates that stressful environment. So as you move up too, chances are you're gaining more freedom to actually make the calls and make the moves that you see need to be made.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. That's great. I had right underneath that, and I know it was just a quick area in the book, but it was me or I equals bad, we or us equals good.
Yeah.
And it's the psychology that he's really referring to, that if you start speaking me and I,
right,
you start thinking me and I.
Yep.
You start thinking me and I, and your brain will be thinking about me and I.
Right.
But if you start speaking in the terms of we and us, and you start thinking in terms of we and us, then your brain will be more in tune with the group, and that's where your empathy and your care goes.
Yep.
So I really believe in those little things.
Yeah, me too.
So one of the things that he talked about was Marines, and he uses that a lot. Going back to life or death.
Yep.
So the story goes that George, he's a very processed, honed, and experienced drill instructor, and so he gets a whole bunch of new recruits, usually not the most confident, and they're young.
Right.
And 13 weeks later, they earn their medal. And one of the things that he talks about, just going back into the emotions and everything, is that it means a lot to him. So they hold, and they're holding this medal.
Yeah.
It just really resonates and gives them dopamine hits. So this is what he says, is Marine boot camp is not what makes them a Marine.
Mm-hmm.
And is what it is that they come together as a team.
Right.
The ability to do remarkable things is absolutely hinged on the ability to work as a team.
Right.
I don't know if it's this book, and there's some other books. I think it was Extreme Ownership, which we'll do one of these days. It's a great book. And they really get into talking about what it takes to be a Marine.
Yeah.
And in that book they start to say, what do you think? You got this big muscle guy, and he's really strong, tattoos everywhere, and just and then you got this little skinny guy, and he comes in and he's a little nervous, and it's just like anybody would fight him. And then they ask, who do you think would be probably the Marine at the end?
Right.
In the perception of the look. And more often than not, you always think, it's the big tough guy.
Right.
But the reality of it is it's usually not that. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's the smaller or other guy, but
sure.
It is the guy that's loyal to the team first and foremost.
Right.
That's who they choose for Marines. It's
right.
nothing to do with all these other variables that we think, this tough guy and all
right.
these things. That comes out after
sure.
they have become, and the reason that they feel tough is because they've learned the circle of trust within their group.
Got the support.
And they have the support because they've learned to work together. And yes, in the extreme of ownership really talks about and brings us home. It's because it's life or death.
Yeah.
You have to count on your guy right next to you for your life.
Right.
And so it really becomes apparent.
Yeah. I still wouldn't want to fight Jocko.
I still wouldn't. Yes.
He's one of those big ones.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and then when you read the book, Extreme is definitely in their way of doing things.
Right.
So, yeah. So I got some in my notes here, just going back to the caveman time.
Okay.
And he talks a lot about that because he really believes that that's where we naturally should be. And the one thing that I love about Simon Sinek, and you've heard me say it in almost every podcast, it's biology.
Yeah.
He's looking at it in a realistic, true perspective.
Right.
And who are we as humans? Where are our strengths and weaknesses as humans? And how do we succeed? And where has been the best successes in mankind? And he really taps into it. He goes back to caveman time and really understands the human behavior. And so I like that. And with lack of resources in everything else, what did they do? They made sure that they survived. They hunted, they gathered. So I like that he starts from there. And what he's really trying to bring it to in this full circle is that in business today, and so we can go back to in caveman time, they were never protected. They came together as a group because they had outside dangers all the time. Right. And so they had to come together as a team to create a safety net to deal with all the outside animals and all of the saber-toothed tigers and all of these very dangerous variables like eating. Yeah. Truly,
Right.
So
survival.
They had survival.
Right.
And that's where Simon starts to go with. And what he believes is that in business today, life hasn't changed. When we talk about these stresses and when we talk about all these things, it might not be the exact same thing and it might not be survival or death or eating.
Sure.
But in business today, each business goes through such severe challenges all day long. And that's where our stresses are at now. Right. Versus in caveman time, it was that we stressed and we had certain elements in who we are to make sure we didn't starve to death and to make sure that we protected ourselves from all the other dangers. Right. Today, that is more implemented in business, and that's where we see that coming out is in business. Yep. And what he's saying is danger is controllable inside. Yep. And that's where I started with the circle of safety.
Yeah, that's really good.
And it's very, very simple. He just draws a circle. Safety inside, in danger outside. And he does talk about layering it. You can layer it. So you have different layers of the company. Let's say that you have a company of 5,000 people. So what is more common than not is that you have an inner circle of safety. Right. And then there's certain layers that it fades away as it goes out. Yeah. And then the new employees are not under that safety circle. Most of the time in most companies, unfortunately, you have to usually work your way into the layers to get to the safety circle. Right.
Yeah, and the whole idea is that if we trust the people around us, then we'll be able to pull together as a unified team and actually do something great.
Absolutely. And that starts with the leader. Yes. He uses another one that I love, the Spartan. And I just love the 300 movie. But one thing that he talks about that I didn't really actually know, but now going back and looking at the movie and understanding it, it makes a lot of sense. So if you ever lost your shield as a Spartan, you were done.
Right.
And the reason being is that was everything to the team.
Right.
So your responsibility to the team, first and foremost over your own, was to keep your shield.
Yep.
And the reason is that how they protected and how they beat armies and how they dealt with things is they'd bring their armor all together and build a huge, massive shield.
Yeah.
Well, if you had lost your shield, you left an open hole.
Yep.
And you were the problem.
Didn't just affect you.
It didn't.
You
just
could lose your
affect
weapon;
you.
they'd forgive that. You could lose whatever, but if you lost your shield, no forgiveness.
No forgiveness. But that really tells the story of how the safety net. Once again, Simon Sinek just does a great job picking stories to really allow you to visualize it and make it easy to understand the concept.
Right. And I feel like all this is just emphasized more for the leader, because the leader has to be the one that exemplifies all of this. You have to be the one to always be protecting your team first. That's your primary role as a leader, is to look out for those inside your circle.
Absolutely. And that's where you can fail or succeed long term. Now, a lot of people can come at me and argue with me, and give me some case scenarios where, no, look at this success, look at this success. The one thing that we can say in almost every situation that would arise from that is the short term. It's not a long term success story. It's a short term. And that's really what the circle of safety is for, is to create a long term solution.
Yeah.
And so let's look at a no circle of safety. So what happens is you have no trust, you have no loyalty, you have no cooperation, and you have a stress-filled environment.
Yes. And you can't thrive. When you feel safe at work, you're able to thrive. If you don't feel safe at work, you can't. You're always worrying about, am I going to lose my job? Am my boss going to be mad at me? Who am I going to make mad? Like, you can't be focused on that stuff.
He uses Ken, the mid-executive working for a bank. Mm-hmm. His work is fine, he says, but not great. It's fine. He stays there to pay bills and feed his kids. That's some serious commitment, and that is probably for the last 100 years the philosophy and the cultural push is to work no matter what and feed your kids and pay your bills.
That's why 80% of people don't like their job.
That's why 80% of the people don't.
But stay.
And so what does he do? He stays.
Yeah.
And so I just really want people to know in the audience that, and it doesn't mean that you have to go find a new job always either.
Right.
You can change your attitude and your mental direction to a positive versus a negative, and really become a linchpin in the environment that you work in.
Yeah.
If your boss is that bad, and there might be some bad companies, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
It might make sense to make a change.
Right.
One of the other areas that he really brings, and I hope a lot of people get some good memories out of this. As soon as I read it, I did. The college dorms.
Yeah.
And to me, that was one of probably the most, you're first left out as an adult, and you're stuck out in the real world. You're pushed away.
Right.
But what happens is that you spend more time, quality time, and I got more memories and connections and learning and everything out of that than I ever would in the classrooms.
Right.
That's where you learn your safety net, and that's why people stay in the dorms. It's not as much negative as people think. And after a few years we move away. But this is what I would challenge anybody that went through that. How many of those people in the dorm do you still have in your friend network?
Right.
More often than not, those are
some of them are there.
Lifelong friends.
Yep.
It's a true circle of safety.
Right.
And I thought that was a great one.